railroad interview, take one.
All right. Bob Wamhoff. When did you... Wamhoff. Well, there you go. Bob Wamhoff. So how'd you get Wammy?
I inherited it.
You inherited it from your papa?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever hear that story?
Yeah, but we'll get to that.
Okay, we won't talk about that story
right
now.
Anyway, you started working for the CB&Q Railroad?
Yeah.
In what year?
Spring of 1970, just before the merger.
And what did you do?
Maintenance.
Maintenance. In this area, strictly?
Yes, in this area for a time, and then we moved around a little bit, did other things.
Okay. Did you mainly work like the Zering to Streeter branch?
Zering to Streeter, and we'd go to Mendota.
Okay.
Go to Earlville.
Okay.
Did you ever work on the Denrock?
No. That, I'm not sure. When did they, do you know when they closed the Denrock branch?
I think it was about 1985. That's when they ripped the tracks up.
That's what I was
But
thinking.
they were talking about abandoning it in like
well, they were talking about abandoning it.
79, 80.
78, 79.
Yeah.
Shortly after they decided to abandon this branch down here, but this branch they sold to Illinois RailNet.
Now, how did you get involved in the railroad?
I was born into the railroad. My father was an engineer. And I only lived 3 blocks from the depot, 3 blocks from the roundhouse.
In Galesburg?
So, yeah. So it was pretty easy to get there and goof off all day long. And everybody knew who I was.
And what did your dad do on the railroad?
He was an engineer.
Okay. So when did he start and finish, retire?
He started in 1938.
Wow.
As a fireman. And he worked till, I think, 1940. And decided that he was tired of shoveling shit, so he was going to run the train instead of have to work. So he trained as an engineer, and since you were a beginner engineer, you had to learn both the steam and the diesel engines. And then shortly after that, World War II broke out, and since he was capable, along with another 125 men, of running both steam and diesel engines, he got drafted to the railroad instead of going to Japan or Germany.
Very interesting. And you mentioned that he had something to do with the 4978 steam engine that's now permanently on display in Mendota.
4978, and I'll give you a small history, was overhauled shortly before it was retired. And it was like brand new, and they were going to scrap it. It was going to Sterling. And what the heck was his name? Thornton. Edmund Thornton in Ottawa wanted it to put on display at the sand plant. So they drug it all the way to Ottawa. My dad, when they closed the branch in LaSalle, moved to Ottawa on the switch engine. So they brought it to Ottawa, and him and the crew pushed it all the way out to the sand plant, pushed it in on that bunch of track panels that they laid down for it.
Okay.
Then they pushed it in there, and then they came back, and it sat there for I don't know how many years. When did Mendota get it?
That was 97. The stuff
97.
they had, it was retired in 65, and I think it arrived there in like May of 1965, so about 32 years.
Yeah, probably about that. But yeah, he had all kinds of stories about 49. 4978 was a freight engine that they used all the time on the main line. And I would imagine just about every 4900 they had, they used. My dad was an engineer on, that's my dad there, on the 56, was it 26 or
26, I believe.
and he was familiar with all of them.
So when he was working on the 4900s, he probably would have worked on the 4960 too at one
Yep.
point.
I got a picture of him on the 4960 too.
Is it that one there?
It's either that one. No, that's not it. It's this one, and then there's one up there on that shelf of him on the 4960. And there's a picture of him there on the 4960 and the 5632. I'm not sure which one he was on, but he was on that excursion.
Okay. Because they did a lot of excursions.
That
On the
picture's
excursion
in
that
Mendota.
went- Oh, that went down the Denrock branch, or no?
No, that was on the main line.
On the main line.
They did a lot of mainline excursions.
I don't know if that was the Christmas special or.
Okay.
They did a lot of school specials. They did a lot
I
of...
rode almost every one of those school specials from Galesburg to Chicago. We went to Galesburg to Peoria.
Oh,
Uh,
didn't know they went to Peoria.
yeah.
I've
So
got...
obviously you remember seeing 4978 and 4960 run.
I don't remember 4978, but I used to play in the Roundhouse in Galesburg on the 4960 and the 5632 and the 637. My dad's best friend was the Roundhouse foreman, so whenever we went to the freight house to get his paycheck, he'd say go over and see Ed. Ed Berry was his name. He was the shop foreman. You go over the Roundhouse and he said, "Oh, not you again." And he'd pick you up and put you in the cab, and you'd sit there and piddle around and look at this and do that for probably 15, 20 minutes, half an hour.
So you were very familiar with the interior of 5632 and 4960.
The interior,
The cab.
Cab.
the cab was, I don't know how you get a dinosaur. 4960 was an older engine, and I can't remember just exactly where everything was, but I did go to see 4960 in Arizona when it moved to the Grand Canyon, and the guy was telling me, he said, you might want to stand there because this old thing has a habit of letting off steam. And I said, yeah, I know. And he says, how do you know this engine? And I said, I grew up on it. And him and the other guy just stared at me, and he said, what do you mean by that? I said, I used to live in Galesburg, and my dad was an engineer, and I used to play at the Roundhouse on this thing when he was talking with my Ed Berry, his best buddy. And they said, come on up here. So I got to get in the cab of the 4960 as it is today, and it was like you were walking into a Twilight Zone. Nothing was the same. Had an electronic water cooler. Had all this kind of good stuff on it, and it's nothing like it used to be. It might be better, but it's not the same.
Yeah, they altered its appearance a lot.
They did. Got a new tender on it, a
Yeah.
new cab, and all kinds of
Yeah.
good stuff.
They got the original headlight, though, I believe.
Original headlight, but they put it in the center
Yeah.
instead of on the roof or on the boiler. And I can't think of what else they added to it.
Yeah, we saw it in 2019. We went by on the train. It wasn't running at that point, but we went right by the shops, and they had it on the shop track. And
Yeah.
so they...
So, I was going to ask you now. You said you started working for the railroad, the CB&Q, and just right before
It
BN
was
came
in the merger when I started.
in the merger. Okay.
So I actually got a CB&Q cap that I was told to dispose of shortly after because it was BN green.
You mentioned that the railroad wanted to get rid of everything with CB&Q.
Everything. We had a guy, and I'm not going to mention his name, but he was from Montana. This was when the railroad thought that the railroad was going to be the great Northern Burlington and Northern Pacific. I don't think they thought that we knew how to do things over here on this side of the river, because they sent these two guys from Montana, and the first thing out of their mouth was, "Hi fellas, my name is Mike Mickelson. I am the road, or the, what did they call him?
Roadmaster.
He wasn't a roadmaster, he was a superintendent, I think is what they called him." And he said, "I've got a job for you." And I said, okay. We were all sitting there and everybody was in agreement that we're ready to do something. He said, "You see all this stuff?" And he had a padlock that had CB&Q on it. He said, "I want all this stuff in the car that you will be receiving tomorrow or the next day." And we're like, "What do you mean?" He said, "I want all this crap gone. This is no longer the CB&Q." So we were told to pick up and dispose of everything that had CB&Q on it. That's why you see a lot of it here, because it never made it to the scrap car.
Yeah.
But yeah, he told us to get rid of everything. So back then they used to take a stamp and stamp the shovels, stamp the angle bars, stamp the spikes. I don't know, I never looked close enough to a spike, but they used to put a stamp CB&Q or BR on everything. The minute the BN took over, they wanted nothing with those markings, and that was his job, I guess, is getting rid of all this stuff right off the bat. The only problem with it was we were told to throw all the tools and everything that had the CB&Q or the BR on it. So whatever we didn't keep and bring home or give to anybody that wanted it went in the hopper.
Yeah.
Tools, shovels,
Wow.
spike mauls, you name it.
Yeah.
Everything went in the scrap hopper.
Wow.
And then they came and got the hopper, and it was sent, I don't know if they sent it to Streeter or Ottawa or wherever it went, but everybody was supposed to do the same thing. Well, we came to work the next day and we just sat there. And the foreman said, "I don't know what to tell you fellas, we're just going to have to sit here and goof off today, I guess, because we didn't have any tools." And that afternoon, the track rider by the name of Daryl Catton showed up and he says, "What are you guys doing?" And he said, "We're sitting here." He said, "Well, why aren't you doing something?" I said, "Because that guy," well, I didn't say it personally, but it pretty much came out of everybody's mouth at the same time, that dumbass from Montana told us to throw everything away that had CB&Q on it. So we threw everything that we didn't confiscate that had CB&Q or BR in the hopper.
And that included your tools.
That included the tools, the jacks, everything. Water cans. What else did we have that had the BN?
Then you have
Safe.
switch stands and
Well, they didn't throw the... I got one of those too. But anyway, first aid kits. Anything that was a CB&Q went in the hoppers. And a lot of it didn't make it in the hoppers, but that was where it was supposed to end up. Well, he said, "Well, what are they doing about replacing your tools?" And he said, "Not our problem." The foreman said, "Not our problem." So Daryl Catton got on the horn and he said, "Where is this guy that's doing all this rearranging and throwing away of materials and stuff?" Well, they knew who he was, but didn't know exactly where he was at. Got a hold of him. He said, "You've got 2 or 3 crews on the LaSalle Streeter Zeering branch. You got 2 crews on the Ottawa to Earlville branch that have no tools," because he told them to throw them all in the scrap hopper. So it took a day or two, but it wasn't too long that we got a boxcar full of tools, and you took what you needed and sent it on to the next place. So we actually got BN tools about a week later, or 4 or 5 days later.
And what kind of things did you do up and down the line as a maintenance worker?
Everything. Building repair,
Bridge
track
repair?
repair. If we had a big bridge product, we'd work on the projects like that. We'd work on the bridge, change ties, stringers.
You mentioned you had a problem one time in Ladd. That's
Oh!
the slag pile kind
With the
of.
slag pile, I don't know if I got pictures of it. I don't know if I got any of it, but I think it was Mrs. Paul Mary.
Yeah, Paul Mary's owned the Ladd Construction
She
Company.
wanted to build a restaurant on the top of the Ladd dump.
Mm-hmm.
And she went up there with a great big D9 cat, leveled the top off, and then shortly after that we got a big rain.
Mm.
And the center, it's like what would you call it? The outside had a crust on it, but the inside was still soft and pliable. Well, the rain made a big pocket at the top of the hill,
Ooh.
filled it full of water, and the water came down, soaked down through the middle of the pile. And when it got to the end of the pile, it blew it out at the bottom. And
Caused
do
a
you guys?
landslide.
No, you're too young to remember that, but your
I'll have
parents
to ask
might.
my mom about that because she might know about that because
Well, the old FS, I don't know where the FS plant went.
is that a fertilizer plant?
Yeah, it
or-
was right there alongside the track.
That was in the Milwaukee Depot at one point, I believe. It was right at the edge because right now there's a building company and then there's a storage, like a storage
Well, the
lockers.
FS was at the end of that alley. The house on the corner, right across from where the old depot used to be.
okay, yeah, I know where that is. Yeah,
And that's another story. That guy, we were talking to his son the day he got killed at Arlington.
yeah.
That was sad too. He
I'd
got
like-
hit by the Zephyr.
Can you tell us about that? That was probably one of the most memorable days, or tragic days that you remember working on a railroad.
We were tearing the crossing out at 89.
Yep.
And we tore the crossing out, and I'm thinking it was about 8:30 or so, somewhere in that area, 9 o'clock maybe, I don't know. Anyway, we had the northbound lane tore out, and we had barricades up and everything, and all of a sudden we heard the squad cars coming, and the squad cars went right through the barriers and flew right over the hole where there was no crossing.
Wow.
Yeah.
And we thought, what in the hell, where are they going that they got to get there so fast that they didn't even bother to change lanes? They just went right through the intersection there, over the top of the crossing, kept right on going. And at that time, we all got I can't remember what they were called, but they were like a two-man walkie-talkie like thing in the truck.
Two-way radio.
Well, you couldn't talk on it, but you could listen. And
Like a scanner, maybe.
yeah, like a scanner. It wasn't a scanner as today, but it was like that. Well, anyway, we heard them calling about that the Zephyr had hit something at Arlington. Nobody knew what they hit yet, but it turned out that it was the guy that owned the FS elevator, or FS
Gallagher.
was a farm
It was.
fueled
I think it was.
gas and oil is what
yeah,
they stored.
there was. I'll have to look into that.
But anyway, the Zephyr hit him and just. It was sad.
Anybody die in that accident? I mean, besides the
The
guy
fireman
driving the
I
truck.
went to high school with, he died. And the engineer,
And the guy in the truck.
the guy in the truck died.
And that was Gallagher.
Gallagher, yeah.
Was the last name. Yeah, my family knew that story because my uncle had actually known the guy that got killed, the guy driving the truck. He was maybe about a year or two younger, but he remembers hearing about that.
I knew one of the officers that went to that call. Last name is Frund. Do you remember that?
Frund.
Frund.
Oh, Frund.
F-R-U-N-D. He was from Spring Valley.
Well, that might be something for my dad because he grew up in Spring Valley.
Well, he later on gave me all the paperwork and all the photographs from that accident that the state police took. And I've got the names of everybody that was on the Zephyr, names of everybody that was on the ground.
Wow.
And it was a pretty rough day for everybody.
Man.
You have pictures of that? You have pictures?
I got some. I got a couple pictures. My dad was on the switch engine in Mendota. And I can't remember. No, maybe he was still in Ottawa. But I got a picture of the switch engine going out and retrieving the train. Mendota switch went and got the train.
So your dad pulled it back into
I
town.
got to look because I can't remember if he was there or he was still in Ottawa.
Oh, okay.
But there was pictures going back into Mendota with the train.
There's one picture of them at the crossing. I don't know which crossing, but they're going through it, and the switch engine's got the engine in tow.
Wow.
Bad day.
And what was the year that you retired?
Formally, in 1980,
1980.
I quit because they abandoned the LaSalle branch in 77 or 8, and I was off with a disability, and as soon as my disability ran out, they were going to send me, I don't know where they were going to send me, and I just said I quit. So that was the end of my railroad.
Well, do you remember any stories about the Q Bridge that crossed the Illinois River there, next to the Illinois Central River? You said you knew the bridge tender there,
Kenny Zolfer.
Kenny Salper. And how did he get to the bridge and back?
On a motor car.
From the highway?
He lived on the bridge, raised a couple kids, him and his wife, and down by where you cross over the canal there, on the other side of that, where the crossing was, he had a small car house off to the right, or off to the left. And he'd park his car there, pull his two-man motor car out, put it on the tracks, and then run down to the bridge, take it off, and he'd be right at home. He lived there. I don't know how long they lived on the bridge.
Wow.
But, and I'm still waiting for somebody to, I didn't, you don't think all that stuff, but I should have taken pictures of the house on the bridge. I didn't. I didn't do a lot of stuff I should have, but.
Well, Will might have pictures because his dad took a lot of pictures. Will Wozniak, his dad took a lot of pictures of the bridge.
Oh, that's what I mean. Somebody's got them, whether his dad has got pictures of the house was actually a coach.
Okay.
And he had a little bitty shed built onto it that he could put his crap in. I don't know what he kept in there, but there was a little shed on the bridge along with that coach. And him and his family lived in that coach. And then I think, I can't remember if they moved to town and the coach was torn off or eliminated.
Did that get flooded a lot? Since
yeah.
it was close to the river there, bottoms.
There were times we'd have to go out there, and underneath the bridge, all the debris that would come down the river would tear the pilings out. And there was one time that I remember that they were afraid it was going to come up enough that they were going to have to abandon the bridge. And we went out there and Kenny moved his furniture and stuff to town. And other than that, I don't think it ever did. I don't think at that time it even came up that high, but they were getting nervous.
But what about the LaSalle yards?
LaSalle
That
Yards
was a
used
little
to
lower.
get full of water too.
Oh, okay.
They still do usually.
Yeah.
They still do, yeah.
That's what happened to the number 5 on RailNet. They left it down at the end of the weeds and it got caught
They
in the,
couldn't get it out.
Yeah. I got pictures of that when I...
2013,
Yeah.
I remember that
Yeah.
flood.
Yeah, it may flood again here soon with the higher waters. A lot of ice.
We'll wait and see.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's nothing down there to get wet anymore.
right.
Yeah.
You remember crossing the old CB&Q bridge over the canal? Over the
Oh, yeah.
Lock 15?
We used to goof. We used to. In the summertime, we used to get 4 or 5 extra workers, high school kids or college kids, and we go down to the bridge and everybody planned the water when it was hot, and yeah, there we had a lot of fun down there.
And the piers are still there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Those aren't going anywhere.
hopefully not.
and I don't remember, is the coal chute still there or is it gone? Used to be a coal bunker underneath the tracks right at the end of the trestle.
On the north end?
I can't remember if it was the north or the.
Oh, wait, you're talking about by the mule stable today?
Is
No.
that still there?
The mule stable, there's trestles inside
Yeah,
the mule
inside.
stable, yeah.
And there used to be a bunker there for unloading coal and
Oh,
sand. And
so that was, okay, coal and sand. I often wondered,
We'll have to look then.
yeah.
Wait when it gets a little warmer. But
Because I seen a picture of an oil tanker car sitting in that little siding up on top there. You had the main, and then there was a little siding up above that, right? That bunker.
the siding was. Siding didn't go over the bridge.
Oh, right. It didn't go over the
Siding
bridge. Yeah.
Was on the west side. And what was that? I think that was. Fred Vogel's. I think that was where his bulk plant was. He used to have those big oil and gas tanks down there.
Oh, Shermer,
Vogel.
Schermerhorn or something like that.
Well, no, it was when I was there. It was Fred Vogel.
Okay.
He drove the fuel truck and they put cars in there for him. And the old mine used to be right there too. What was that, number 7?
oh, was that the carbon coal mine? Maybe.
No, that one was further down by the IC bridge. Was there a coal mine
One of
right
those
there
big-
by the canal?
When you went down the hill, you'd see those big. I don't know. I'll have to get my history book out. But I'm thinking that was Walsh, the Walsh. It was a coal company.
Oh, Uranage? Coal
well,
and oil?
Before Uranich, it was, I think, the Walsh.
Oh,
but that-
but the same spot?
Yeah, right there as you
Okay.
cross over where the old depot used
Yes,
to be. It
Creve
was
Coeur.
right to the east of that on the south side of the
Gotcha.
tracks.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think
Okay.
I'll have to get the pic. I think I
think
got some
Slusher's
pictures of
got-
those. But I think
Yeah.
those was like number 7 or something was on the side of
Okay,
them.
okay.
I can't remember.
Slusher has some pictures of that.
Well, I think that's probably who I got
yeah.
them from.
Yeah.
But
I'll try to put them in this video here.
a lot of the neat stuff was already gone by the time we got going, and then we just eliminated everything else.
But you still had the depot there when you were
Oh yeah,
working.
depot was still
Yeah,
there.
right there on Creve Coeur, right there
Yeah.
at the cross.
Depot was still there. We painted it.
You painted it. What color was it?
It used to be a kind of a oxidized brown color
Okay.
with a black roof.
So was it a wood clapboard siding type, or was it a brick structure?
Brick. Most of it was brick, and
Brick.
then there was a few additions to it.
Okay.
There was back in the old days. There used to be a carport off the east end of it. I got a picture of a Model A parked in that carport,
Oh wow.
and everybody used to, when after the carport was gone, used to be these big concrete slabs that were there holding the port up. Everybody used to park there, and we had a. You're going to edit this, right? We had a guy that most people didn't like, and once in a while, we go over and pick his car up and put him between those pillars. He had a little bitty, forget what it was. Well, it doesn't matter, but anyway, we got about 6 or 8 guys go over there and pick his car up and slide it in between those pillars, and he couldn't get it out.
Oh.
At 4 o'clock, everybody'd leave, and he'd be there trying to figure out. He'd have to
Great.
for an hour and a half trying to get it out of that spot.
My gosh.
I would hate that.
So is that where you started your work day? You went to work, you started at that depot there and did whatever, went wherever.
Every day
Did you
for 8 years.
go to Spring Valley?
Yeah.
Tanner or
We had-
Trenton had a... Oh, go ahead.
Well, you go ahead. I'll
Well,
answer
you had a
your
question
questions.
for him about the Spring Valley sign.
Well,
Trenton?
we in the basement of the depot in Mendota, we actually have the Burlington Spring Valley station signs, and I posted that on the IR Facebook group. And there was some people, and I think it was Harold Kruer. He was saying there was
Harold?
well, there's
Oh, my God.
various
There's an
people.
old friend.
Yep.
Yeah, well, there's various people. They were saying, like, if you go down there, I think today, there should be still some, like, depot foundation. It was like, because I've seen a picture.
Foundation. The depot was a passenger car.
For Spring Valley.
Spring Valley didn't have a CB&Q depot. It was a coach.
Okay.
It was right on top the knob, just to the south of the bridge,
Okay.
and you overlooked the sand plant, or the gravel.
Yeah, Western Sand.
And we used that as a communication headquarters. We'd have to stop there and call Zeering to find out where the way freight was before we could go beyond that point. And we'd stop there, and I'm telling you, there were spiders in there about that big around. You
Oh,
didn't spend
my.
much time in it.
Oh,
It was
Yeah.
scary, so
Well,
that
that
we
was-
finally tore it down.
But then you put the signs up when the Burlington Northern came along. So it
Well,
would,
the BN, as soon as all that started going on, we had to tear the Ladd Depot down. We tore the Spring Valley Car House down. Let me think. Most of the outbuildings we eliminated.
okay. So when was the Ladd Depot torn down? Because that was the barn structure.
That was in the early 70s, I know.
Okay.
Because we got a prefab shed. I don't know if you ever saw those, but the
Yeah.
railroad was good at building those things in the
Yeah.
wintertime. You get 4 sides with 8 guys, you push the sides up, and some guy drives a pin in each corner, and then you fold it all together, then you get up and lift the roof off, and then put the pins in that,
Okay.
and that's when that shed came about.
Okay.
And I don't know how long the shed lasted. It was still
Well,
there when I
it's
quit.
long gone, but everything over there's gone, and the sign for the Burlington Northern sign actually just came down, and my brother actually has that because I guess with their track project they piled a bunch of wood up against it, and it was bending the post and kind of bending the sign, and allegedly I guess they said they were going to take it out because it was getting in the way. And he said, well, what are you going to do with it? And they didn't know what to really do with it, so they thought of him, and he said, oh yeah, I'll take it. So
Yeah.
he's got it.
So where's the Spring Valley? Where was the Spring Valley sign along the tracks? That's the question. Trent.
Yeah, that was
Spring Valley sign.
Was it after the bridge going south?
There was a sign just maybe 600-800 feet north of the bridge.
Okay.
Just before you go around that bend, if you're coming from the north, you come around that bend, and the Spring Valley sign would have been in that vicinity somewhere.
Okay.
And
So between the trestle there and
the curve.
the curve.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's where that was. Because now we've got it. It's safe in the basement.
I don't remember. Is that spring still there?
It's in the basement or
No, that up there on the curve, there used to be 2 pipes come out of the ground, out of the hillside, and it was the best water you ever wanted.
I don't know.
There was
wow.
there was one up there just before the curve, and then there was one down at the other end just before you went to the crossing at Webster Park.
Okay.
And we'd stop there and fill the water cans up, fill jugs up, fill everything you'd get your hands on with that water.
Because it was nice, cool water. It was for Western Sand. You followed the Chicago Northwestern from Ladd parallel basically all the way to Spring Valley. Did you ever have an interchange track between them? Like not at Western Sand or...
The only interchange was up. It was west of Delzell, right there at the curve before they go
Okay.
over Spring. Well, no, we didn't. There wasn't a bridge there. Spring Creek was on the west side, and just as you get ready to turn the curve, and the siding's still there. It goes up the hill and goes into Peru Park or whatever they call that area over there where what's there? Woolahans used to be, and
Okay. So that was the only interchange.
that was the only one we had there.
But you never had any other connections along the parallel track.
Not there. We had connections at Spring Valley or at Ladd.
Okay.
Everybody could connect at Ladd.
Yep, that was the big town.
Did you ever make it out to Leonore and down to Lowell to the brickyards?
Ray,
Yes.
Yes. yes, I did. A lot of times,
Why do you say it that way?
because we hated that.
You hated it?
You worked your butt off if you ever went to Lowell. Unless you came across things.
Yeah. You could give a G-rated version of that, right?
Well, it wouldn't be as interesting, but there was a certain area back between Lowell and Leonore, so to speak, where nobody ever, really traveled very often. We'd get there maybe twice a month. And they'd send us with the way freight because the way freight was, I think, scared to go that way by themselves. So they'd send 3 or 4 of us with the way freight, and you'd clear debris off the tracks. You'd have to clean this, do that. Switches, you'd have to clean the switches out. You'd have to do other things like that. And one day we had to clean a car out of the way. Somebody had parked their car on the tracks, and upon walking up on that car, we found that it wasn't vacant.
Oh.
So do I have to explain any more?
No, you don't have to.
But anyway, we kindly
You told
asked,
me the X-rated
we
version.
kindly asked the gentleman to move his car off the tracks. Him and his young lady friend, and he gladly pulled his drawers up and started the car and moved it off the tracks, and we all had a good laugh. And we got we got to the little brickyard, and of course it was filthy. You had to clean these switches out. You had to re-groove the tracks so the engine wouldn't fall off or the cars wouldn't fall off. And we spent a good hour and a half, 2 hours doing that. And then we were getting ready to go, and the conductor said, "Bob, we're going for lunch. You guys want to go?" So we walked across the street to the diner in Lowell. Ma Turpin was her name, and she had the best rhubarb pie. And we were walking over there. Frank was an elderly man, not really, but his legs were shot, and he asked me to do him a favor. So I'm thinking it was, well, I'm not going to give this guy's name because he anyway, we walked over to the Lowell office, and we walked in, and lo and behold, it was the lady that was in the car out in the middle of nowhere, was the secretary, and we handed her the bill of ladings for these cars we brought in, and she was looking just as dumbfounded as we were.
Wow.
And then she buzzed for the president or the guy in charge. He came out the door and he said, "Oh, hey, hi, good to see you again."
Oh, God.
So it was like, turn around, walk over to the restaurant, and we told those guys over there, and they were in hysterics. They were, it was, and to make a long story just a little bit longer, every time we went over there, we'd always be on the lookout. Well, he was smart enough, there used to be a little tractor shed just to the east of the tracks, and he'd actually pull his car over closer to that shed so you weren't supposed to see him. Well, he had a great big Cadillac convertible, and I think it was either white or yellow or something, but there was no trouble seeing it. So everybody just kind of waved, and
So the track was so bad there, and that on that branch from Leonore to Lowell.
to Lowell,
I mean,
it was, I think,
the worst track you've ever seen.
oh no, but it was old track. It was original, probably, I don't even think it was 90 pounds. It was probably more like 73 or 73 pound rail or something like that.
And what kind of engine were you running down there?
We had, usually we'd go with a Jeep or we'd go with an SD.
An SD.
We had Jeep 9s and 7s and a SD 9 or 24.
Wow. That's
Was an SD9 a 6-axle unit? Wow, so that made it down at pretty
It made it awfully scary.
Okay. Wow. And you always sported around a way car, caboose?
Yeah, we used to have fun in there.
Yeah?
We used to have soup parties. Somebody'd bring a big thing of soup and put it on the stove, and then we'd get, well, we'd get someplace. If we'd get to Lowell and you didn't go to Ma Turpin's for lunch, you go back to the way car, and you'd have your lunch, and Frank or one of the other guys would whip up this big pot of soup. So you go back there and you'd have fun and goof around for your lunch hour.
No, for the way cars, there was some things I've seen, the wooden way cars. At some point, they were still running them as far up to 1970.
They ran them as long as the wheels would turn.
Okay.
And when the wheels quit turning, they'd shove them in the hole, and hopefully something would light them on fire, or somebody would want one for their backyard. You guys are too young to remember the Whistle Stop and the Red Door Inn.
Where was that at?
Down on Water Street.
Oh, I remember the building, but I don't remember it being
Well,
open.
if you go back there and look on the
caboose
west
is
end,
still there.
the caboose is still sitting in there.
Yeah.
We put that in
Oh,
there.
really?
Wow.
Jimmy Murphy was my cousin. Or I should say is my cousin. I don't know if he's passed away or not, but he used to work for the Illinois Central. And him and his dad had this gigantic wrecker. and they'd tow trucks and cars and this and that and the other thing. Well, what was his name? Andre. Guy that owned the Red Door. Victor Andre was his last name. Andre. He called the depot, wanted to know if he could get his hands on a caboose. So then back then you used to have to call the Eola Yards. And the Eola Yards had a list of vacant stuff or salvageable. They had track and track after track after track of junk. And he asked if he could get a caboose. And they went out there and they found two of them. Both of them had broken coupler pockets on the same ends. So they chained these two together, sent them to LaSalle, and gave them both to him for $1,500.
Wow.
Great.
The only problem is he didn't have any place to put the other one. So you remember there used to be two coaches, which was the whistle stop. You guys are too young to remember that too. But they were passenger CB&Q passenger coach. One was a baggage car. The other one was the baggage was a diner too, I think. And then there was a Pullman car that sat right there across from the Red Door. And I think that spur that was there is the same one that's sticking up in the driveway of Mays Lumber.
Okay.
Oh, that's where.
But anyway, that spur, they pushed these two the passenger car and this combine car in there, and a man by the name, he just passed away not too long ago, Lenny, and made the whistle stop. It was the best bar you ever wanted to go into, not being 21.
Oh.
You'd go in there and he'd say, "How old are you?" And you'd say, 21. And he'd laugh at you and he says, "Well, I'll give you a beer." So you'd go in there and you'd have a beer, or maybe have two, and then he'd chase you out. But that was one of the first places, because when I started on the railroad, I had just about turned 18. And you know what, you feel like if you can go to war and fight for some people you don't even know, you might as well be able to drink. So we'd go down there and wait for the guy to call our number in the draft and have a couple beers. And he said, "As long as you guys don't get overdone, if you're old enough to fight, you're old enough to drink."
Wow.
And we took him up on that, and thank God I never got drafted. I missed it by about that far.
Wow.
Wow.
So anywho, the caboose, we picked it up and moved it over in Andre's, and the other one sat there for a long time. And the city, I think, city of Peru, put the pressure on them to get rid of it, and I think where were we?
Caboose at the Red Door.
The Red Door, we put that in there, and they built around it, they made a dining room out of it.
Okay.
And it's still there, and as far as I know, it still looks like a dining room on the inside.
Yeah.
The other one, I'm thinking that some scrapper came and got the wheels and stuff from the other caboose. The other caboose, they just burned it on the spot and took the metal and went off to the scrapper. And the coaches, I think they were destroyed on the spot too. They were cut up and hauled away.
Did your dad kind of get you on the railroad, kind of edge you onto the railroad, coerce
I graduated high school, Ray.
Good.
If you don't mind me mentioning your name.
Good.
He got me a job. Well, the whole thing was I graduated. And he came over and gave me a big hug, thinking that I wasn't going to graduate. I'd probably skip down and go to God only knows where. And he said, "Son, I'm proud of you. You graduated high school." And he said, I got you a present. And I'm thinking of everything under the sun, and it wasn't what I came up with. I'm thinking, oh, gee, what would it be? And he said, I got you a job on the railroad. You start Monday. And I went, what? A what? He said, you go for your physical tomorrow. And if all goes well, you'll start Monday morning.
Wow.
I said, today's Wednesday. I just graduated. So I didn't even get to have a graduation party or
Wow.
So were you really
anything.
depressed and bummed out, or
Would
anxious,
you be depressed
nervous?
if you worked for the railroad?
Well, some people would.
I had a lot of fun. Was it my choice? No. I got nothing. I can't think anything else because it was a job I liked for the 8 years that I worked.
But it must have really had an effect on you, because look at all these model trains.
Well,
there. You're a big
like I
CB&Q
said,
fan.
I grew up on the railroad. My dad, everybody up here, most of the pictures up here that you can see, the guys in the cabs, are all friends of my dad that I grew up with. Guys like Hugh Smith, George Spinader, and you know there's Spinaders that still live in Mendota, and Hod Nelson and Billy Smith and
How about this name, Roy Giacomelli? Do you know that name? He was from Ladd.
I know the name. I can't think if I
I think he was an engineer, I believe.
was he on the IC or
No,
the
he
Milwaukee?
worked on the Burlington.
Giacomelli.
He worked on the Burlington.
He wasn't on the branch then.
I-
Might have been on the main line.
I think he was on the branch for a little while.
Well, I don't remember him.
Oh.
What year did you retire then?
I got out on a disability in 1980.
Oh, okay.
And that was right about when the line was...
The line was already abandoned. They called to tell me that I either go wherever they send me or take a disability or retire or quit.
Yeah.
So I just quit. I never went back.
So do you have any stories you'd like to share? That, I mean, you've already shared a whole bunch and they're great. Anything else that you can think of that would be
Gee,
important?
Ray, ask me something. Because you know all the damn stories already. You've been pumping me for the past 10 years.
Well, you've been telling me the stories and I find them fascinating. So I thought, this is important enough to document. And are there some that we forgot? I know I love the Leonore or the Lowell story. And
The Lowell story.
I love the slag pile coming down. I don't know if you finished that one. The slag pile coming down on the track.
You said it piled up water in the center and rushed down to the base.
The water built up in the center of the mountain, and it seeped down through the middle of it. And when it got down to hard ground, it blew the gob pile. We used to call it the gob pile. Blew out at the bottom, and there was millions of feet, tons of mud and slag and everything. It was this high over the top of the tracks.
Wow.
And it was moving all the way into the city of Ladd.
Caused an avalanche.
Oh,
essentially.
and you couldn't shovel it. It was like trying to, if you put too much milk in your oatmeal,
Oh, it gets all like...
it's like it takes you forever to eat that bowl of oatmeal. Well, that's what it was like shoveling it. And we just said, hey, we didn't cause this problem.
Yeah.
And we're not going to sit here and try and shovel.
No.
And really the railroad wasn't concerned about the city of Ladd. They weren't considered the streets to be any importance. So they brought in a Jordan spreader and a bulldozer. And of course the bulldozer didn't work. We got equipment that was auctioned off after probably World War II.
Okay.
And the flat car had a D6 or D5 Caterpillar tractor. And it had a blade and a belly scraper on a flat car.
Wow.
And we couldn't get it started. So they brought the Jordan spreader. They even brought a pile driver. We drove piles along there somewhere. I can't remember how.
How far down? Wow.
I think we started on the east end and moved, and then we gave up on that. But anyway, the Jordan spreader went out and pushed it all off the rails, but they needed somebody to shovel it out of the center. So we shoveled for a while. I don't remember how we ever finished up that. But yeah, they had a lot of hard feelings about that. But anyway, the guy from over at the construction company came over and worked on that bulldozer
Okay.
as kind of a favor, since we were going to use it to remove his wife's mess. So they got the bulldozer going, and as soon as we got the bulldozer running and started to unload it off the flat car, they called and said, load it back up. The way freight's picking it up, they're taking it somewhere else. So we never did use the bulldozer, but we didn't even, this was military equipment that was brought back from somewhere. Maybe it was sent to Hawaii or sent to some place where they were building, back in the days they used it, it was probably Corps engineers. They would use these things to make airstrips, because one flat car was full of these connectable steel plates, artificial landing strip.
Yeah.
We had unloaded all that stuff and they took off without it, and people were taking that landing strip. I don't know who did what. I know I got a couple pieces of it.
They probably use it for muddy ground.
Well, that's what it was for, and whether the construction company took it, but the whole car was gone.
Wow. I'll definitely have to ask around town. They might remember that story. My mom, my uncle might remember that story. But because everybody in town knew the dump, and that was one of the big things that they had talked about, was when they were going to put this big thing on top of it. But when the construction began on it, they did like drilling down to see can it
That's
support
where the
any
water
weight.
went, was through the
Yeah.
holes that they had drilled to see
That's
how it
probably
was.
why
That's
they
probably
didn't end up. They
that's
ended up
probably why
scrapping
they
the
ended
pump.
up not building it, because it wasn't supporting it. It couldn't support any weight.
Well, shortly after the gob pile was put on hold, we decided to do the 89 crossing with a rubber crossing. So we went over there and we tore it all up and replaced all the ties and did this, did that. And at the same time, we were going to rebuild the bridge just west of town. So we got, I don't know how many, 2 or 3 flat cars full of ties, stringers, everything you could imagine. And it was sitting right across from where the depot used to be. And the rubber crossing, we were there doing the rubber crossing, and we got to work one day and somebody had come over the weekend and stole everything off the property.
Wow.
And next thing you know, there's railroad police, there's state police, everybody and their brothers trying to figure out who stole. And it was probably close to $20,000-$30,000 worth of lumber. But somebody took every stringer, every railroad tie.
Wow. They must have needed wood badly.
Well, somebody did. We never did do the bridge. They just finally did the bridge.
Yeah.
After 30 years, they just did it. What, last year or the year before?
They've been doing it for a couple of years, because when they started running the heavy sand trains over the big tall bridge.
There's something else, because we could never have a big engine. The Jeeps were the biggest they'd give you, unless they'd come down with those big SDs, and those were considered big at that time.
Yeah.
They'd come down with those big SD24s or the SD9s, and next thing you know, they'd be on the ground out at the slide. And I don't know if you guys know where the slide's at, but it's directly behind that stretch that goes from St. Bede's to Webster Park. If you ever get a chance to go out, your brother comes that way, doesn't he?
Yeah, sometimes.
Ask him the next time he comes
The
that way.
slide.
We used to call it the slide because as soon as you got past Webster Park, the track went like this. Then it'd come back up and go sideways, this way, this way, and those big SDs, they'd come up. We couldn't level it. We'd level it. Next day you go out there, it was right back where it was before. And you go out there and you get a radio call that the SD's on the ground. You'd have to go out there with the rail frogs and they'd back it up. You'd get it back on the tracks. He'd start to pull ahead and the car behind him would come uncoupled because the couples would come up and down like that. They hated it, so they quit using the big engines, went back to using the Jeeps. But as far as I know, it's still like that because there was nothing they could do to fix it. There's another story, Raymond. I'll tell you about the time we dumped the water in it.
Oh, I think this is the
What
drainage.
water?
This is the drainage ditch.
Well, this was in the wintertime, and we used to have a set-off right before you get to Webster Park. So we got up, set the motor car on the set-off, and we sat down to have lunch. And we went over to the cleanest spot. There was probably this much snow everywhere, but this spot had no snow on it. Couldn't figure out, didn't think about it. We went over there, a fellow by the name of Andy Rios and me and a friend you might remember by the name of Pete Ferrari. We went over there and we made like a little bunk on the side of this hill. And we were sitting there and sitting there and sitting there. Everybody started moving around. Boy, this is getting hot. And I said, yeah. Everybody's moving around and it got hot. You get up, you feel the property underneath your butt, and it was like 120 degrees. So we went over and told the foreman, he said, Gene, we got a problem over here. And we all got together, went over and looked at it, and we took a lining bar. Ran the lining bar down there about 4 feet, 5 feet. As soon as we brought the lining bar out, the steam started shooting out of that hole. So we went back to town, called the big shots. The big shots come out in their big limo van rail truck and checked things out, and they said, something wrong here. And it was like, you think? And why would this be so hot? Well, they came out, I don't know where they were from, probably Montana, brought these guys and they surveyed the property and they brought a core driller, the whole 9 yards, and they bored down about, I don't know how far, probably 80 feet, 100 feet, and found that there was a fire down there.
The old coal mines.
The old coal mine, number 1 or number 2 or number 12, ran right along that lip that they built the damn railroad on. And
Yeah.
so anyway, something caused the fire to start down below there, and it was burning the entire length of that slide.
Wow.
And when the cavity would cave in, slide would drop, ground would go right into it.
And that's why the dip was there.
Well, the boys from Montana came up with a way of fixing this. They brought in 2 33,000-gallon tank cars. Brought them to LaSalle. The fire department came down, hooked the hose, and they filled these tank cars up during the week. And then they asked for volunteers to go out and spend the weekend watering this hole. So I think it was me and Dave Nepps, Jim Marini, and a guy that I wasn't going to mention, but he deserves some credit, Doc Merle Pusheni. He used to work in the summertime, and we went out there and we turned these valves and watered the hill. So we dumped these 2 cars on Saturday and Sunday, and the way freight got them on Monday, and the Rock Island called and said, we have an issue out here at St. Bede's. And we went out and it had blown everything below the tracks down the hill and covered the Rock Island with mud about that deep.
Oh boy.
So, and we had a big void. We had maybe 40 by, it had to be 40 by 30 foot hole where it blew out. And we found more junk in there. I think what they used to do is just fill the land with junk and then build a railroad on top of it.
Oh my.
But so we had to crib all that. We used the entire stock of ties in the city of LaSalle to haul out there and build this cribbing. So we built the cribbing, and lo and behold, the boys from Montana show up again, and we're just about to dump the rock over the side to fill in this hole, and they came up with this brainstorm of putting a cable on the ties at the bottom, and as the gravel fills it up, pull the ties up and bring them back to the surface, and we'll put them back on the flat car. Well, a few of the guys from here, the big shots that were from this area, said, I suggest you boys get back in that vehicle and head back for Montana. Because
That ain't gonna work.
first of all, it wasn't safe, and they didn't want to lose any money by spending those money and losing those ties down there, so they wanted to leave well enough alone, and the boys from Montana wanted you to retrieve the ties.
Yep.
That was a real hoot.
Yeah.
We had to go down and clean the tracks off on the Rock Island.
I was wondering who had to do that.
Well, it was a combination. We worked together on that. A lot of good guys on the Rock Island.
Yeah.
We went down and shoveled, and then they brought out a drag line or something.
Did you have much interchange between the CB&Q, Burlington, and the Rock Island down there where the depot was in that area? Was there a track connecting?
There was
Yeah.
there was an interchange track.
There might even still be an interchange.
No,
track.
that's
No,
that's
it's
long gone.
But yeah, once in a while, you'd get a couple of cars that'd go up there and come down.
Okay.
But by that time, nothing was going on in LaSalle on the Rock Island. They'd eliminated the switch engines, and
Yeah, let's see. The Rock Island,
Went out in 1980.
1980. Yeah, about the same year you quit. And the West
well,
Clocks,
the switch engines, I think, were gone probably by 72, 73. I don't think there was a LaSalle switch engine.
Okay,
No,
so they
but-
came out of Mendota.
No, it came out of Ottawa.
Oh,
For
it
the
came out of
Rock Island, for
Ottawa.
the
Well,
Rock
Okay.
Island.
LaSalle had its own switch engine. That's what that building down there was for.
It's still
That
there.
engine house was the switch engine shop, or the engine house.
Yeah. They still have a drop pit in there too.
Yeah, everything's there.
Oh, I gotta get
And
in there.
They used to
I'd like
use
to.
when they got rid of the switch engine, they'd bring a Jeep. I think it was from Ottawa. Would come down here and spend the night and do things in the morning and head back. I don't know. You'd have to get some history from
Yeah,
maybe get D. Brown involved. He'd know.
yeah. Would you like to run some trains for us?
No.
No? All
I
right.
have one more question.
Oh,
Did you have
well.
any interactions with railroad police?
His eyes go wide.
Personally, no.
Did they?
Yeah. The only time we had any problem with the police is when somebody ransacked a car, and usually they found out it was a hobo that just wanted to get in out of the cold. I gotta tell you the story about old Joe that died on the switch engine.
Sure.
We used to have a hobo, I can't remember what his name was, but Joe sounds good. There was always 5 or 6 of these old birds, and the police would bring them down October or November and say, could you do us a favor? So we'd say, sure. So we'd take them out, and we'd help these guys get in the boxcar. Then the way freight would take them to Zeering, and then they'd get picked up and go one way or the other, and for the winter, and 6 months later they'd be right back, and this one old bird wouldn't leave, and he'd curl up in cubby holes and then break into the, you don't remember where Levine's was,
No.
but Levine's was a produce down between the old depot and the loading platform. You remember the loading platform? It was
No.
right there on the end of the road
Oh,
before you go to Spillers or go to Buckman's.
okay.
Used to be a loading platform there. Well, Levine Produce was right there, and he'd break in there and get in and keep warm. Well, summer came, and it was hotter than hell. And Friday night, my old man was still on the switch engine at that time, so that was probably 72 or 3, maybe 74. Anyway, we came to work and we had place to go, so we took off, and my dad came in and went to service the engine, and he said you couldn't see into the cab, and he went over and opened the door, and this old bird crawled in there sometime between Friday and Monday morning and died and exploded inside the engine, and it was so full of flies and crap that you
What?
couldn't.
Whoa.
This old hobo climbed in the switch engine. My dad said there's no point locking it up. They can't move it, but if I lock it up, they'll bust the windows out of it, which they did numerous times.
Wow.
So anyway, he'd just leave the door open, but to take the control stick, and they couldn't move it and lock the brakes up. This old bird got in there and sat in my dad's chair and died. And my old man went up there to climb in and couldn't figure out why the windows were all messed up. Opened the door, and this old bird exploded sitting in that chair from 130-degree heat.
Wow.
So he went in, got on the horn. The way freight brought him another switch engine. They took that thing after the coroner was done and hauled it to Eola for a cleaning, and then it came back 6 weeks later.
My oh my.
Dang.
So it's got 130 degrees in that cab?
Oh, with the windows closed.
Wow.
Oh, it's
Over the
interesting.
weekend, when it's 100 degrees outside, you know it's going to be hotter than
Oh,
balls.
yeah, okay.
inside
I was
the
thinking
car
it was the
or
winter.
inside the cab.
Okay, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
No, it's the heat.
Okay, I'm on a roll now. Keep me going.
What about that trestle that was over by Mays that went over the river a little bit? Did they fill that in? That may have been way before your time.
That was before my time, and you can. I'll take that back. When I started, every time the river'd come up, it'd wash the bank away.
Oh, okay.
And I do remember seeing the piling. Piling is still there, but we dumped, I don't know how many cars of riprap over the bank. And right, if you go right before you go under the bridge, I think, you see all that big rock
Oh, okay.
on the bank.
Okay.
That riprap was put there to cover all that up. We figured that the riprap wouldn't move with the water, and evidently they were right to tell us that, because it's still there.
It is.
But that's where the bridge was exposed.
Okay. I remember seeing old photos.
Yeah, and it's right down there by where the double track was. The double track, you can still see where they tore up the track at Mays Lumber in the driveway there.
Yeah, there's still a little.
It's right in there. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you something else. Just to the east of the Mays Lumber, we were told by the Corps of Engineers that there's only about that much difference between the river and the mine shaft below.
Wow.
So someday we're liable to have water coming up everywhere.
Wow.
You can cut that part out.
No, that's
I
interesting.
might-
Steve
I might
Shutt
go
used
to
to tell
jail.
me about
I
that.
might go to jail for saying that, but when the Corps of Engineers came here, they did a whole study on stuff
Yeah.
that was along the riverbank.
Yeah, Steve Shutt told me about there were shafts underneath the river there.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
go all the way to the hill. Where's that? Where Sampo's body shop is up there. Goes all the way to Piety Hill on the other side of the bridge.
Wow.
It's all scary.
Geez.
Now that depot in Peru, the CB&Q depot along the river, right across from the Red Door, and then you had the one in LaSalle on Creve Coeur. So were there a separate CB&Q employees, Burlington, that went there, or did you just all consolidate in the LaSalle depot?
Well, it was already consolidated by probably 20 years by the time I started.
Oh, okay.
Because there was no depot in Peru.
Okay, they
That
tore
was the
that
only
down.
depot
Yeah.
they had, but I got picture of the old Peru depot, I think.
Okay. All right. I was wondering if that was there.
And they used to have, it wasn't really depots, it was more just shanties.
And he's kind of like the Illinois RailNet has a little caboose for their
Well, it wasn't
office.
even like that. It was just a portable building. There used to be one in Vroman, Illinois. You remember where Vroman's at?
No.
Right over at the base of the Vermilion, below the Marquette. And I'll give you some more history. Just to the south of that little station area, and to the south and to the west, was where Chester Uyghur lived. And then the
Wow.
bunkers lived over here on the other side. And then you had a curve there, and then the yards to the Marquette started.
Okay.
That was a station. That's where the people from Oglesby would go down that hill and get on the train there. That wasn't a train. The fish wagon is what they used to call it. Don't ask me why, but that was a word Pete Ferrari used all the time. The fish wagon.
Well,
Ask your parents about Pete Ferrari too.
well,
He
my
was a
mom knows the name.
Oh my
They
God,
know-
he was 89 years old, still working on the railroad.
They know
It
the
was
name.
89 in the early 70s.
Still working.
I don't know if he was 89. That's what we used to call him.
He
but
just
anyway,
he
they
just
sent-
looked old.
They sent somebody from higher up to come in and ask him if he was in the mood to retire. And he said, "Why would I want to retire?" And they asked him if he knew how old he was, and he says, "I'm old." And I don't. Poor guy never learned how to read, never learned how to tell time. And he was a corker. He loved to drink his beer and smoke cigarettes. And they asked him when they came in, he said, "Pete, do you know how old you are?" "No, but I'm up there."
Wow.
And they gave him, I think he started like in, well, he worked for the railroad for 50 years, I know of. So he had to start back then in the 30s.
Okay.
Well, anyway, they finally told him that, "Pete, as of Monday, you're retired." He was one hard-working old bug, though.
Wow.
Interesting.
What else you want to know?
Well, I don't know if you have any other stories.
Bring up a subject, I'll tell you.
All right, I can do that. How about the little following the Vermilion out of the going towards Streeter? Did you ever encounter any issues with that?
I knew you were going to bring that up.
I don't even. I'm just guessing. I'm just.
Oh, you were just guessing.
Yeah, what's going
Well,
on? Tell
Back
us.
in 72 or 3, we built a siding at the Marquette to add an extra 8 to 10 cars of cement on this siding. We went up there, and the first thing that happened is the switch engine went on the ground. So we hauled these railroad frogs. You know what a frog is?
Yes.
we hauled these frogs all the way up to where the switch engine was on the ground, which was approximately 8 car lengths from that curve, from that switch, because they just started pushing those cars in the switch, and the switch engine went kaput. So we hauled these damn things up there, and they weren't new ones, they were the old web ones like this. Are you familiar with the web frogs?
Possibly not. No.
Well, these
But
things,
anyway.
they were shaped like a big web about this wide, so they'd pick up cars on this side or re-rail cars on this side. So if you drug them,
Okay.
you could drag them into the rail or drag them onto the rail.
Gotcha.
And these things were about 200 pounds apiece. So we drug them from way back yonder all the way to the front. And when we got done, we brought up how are we going to get these back, because the switch engine didn't sit there and wait for us. We cleaned up the mess, switch engine did its job and took off for town. Here we are with these frogs. Well, there was a bank, a ledge of all rock that went up probably 40, 50 feet, and there was a little cubby hole at the bottom of it. So we took these frogs and stuffed them in this cubby hole and thought we'd come back on a day when it was a little nicer and take them back to LaSalle. Well, that day never came. We were called to go to Lowell, and it was snowing, and so we figured we'd be shoveling snow and cleaning switches and do this. Well, anyway, we're all sitting in the cab. There must have been 7 guys in that cab. And this was with Eddie Yeager and Paul Yeager and
I remember Ed.
who was this?
Okay, go ahead.
Can I move?
No, yeah.
I can't remember everybody that was on there, but Jimmy Marini, we called him Hairdo because he had this blonde hair that curled up like a bouffant type thing, you know. So we called him Hairdo. And him and Dave Nepps, I think, we were all in the cab. Everybody else was in the way car. And I was sitting in the fireman's seat. And we're going along, and I'll tell you, when you're going along like this, and you were out all night the night before, it doesn't take much to start fading off, you know. Anyway, we're going, and the snow covered the tops of the rails, and we're going along, and I'm looking down the track, and I could see this thing probably about 8-10 car lengths away, and it was that web. And the closer we got, I'm getting nervous, and I'm yelling. Oh God, I can't think of the engineer's name, an old guy. Anyway, I'm yelling, and he's waving at me from over in his chair, and blah, 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 blah. And I grabbed Paul Yeager by the shoulders, and I turned him around, and I put my hand over here like this, pointed right down there. I said, frog. He wore hearing aids. But when he looked down and saw it, he knew what I was saying, frog. So he went over and hit the e-stop button. Not soon enough, because we hit the frog, and whoever put it on the rails put it on the wrong end. They put it on the wrong side of the joint, so when we hit it, we actually pushed it down the tracks until we hit the next joint. So we hit the next joint, went over it, and just went boom, down on the ground. And everybody was looking out the side window because the Vermilion was right down there.
Wow.
Everybody was scared shit. Can I say that?
You can.
Shitless. And so everybody's running to get off the damn thing. We got out, and luckily the engine just came off the tracks and pushed itself right in the mud.
Wow.
So there was another thing. We had 4 empties to go to the brickyard, plus the way car, and a guy by the name of Bob Urbis was the car man from Mendota, or maybe he was from Earlville, I don't remember. But anyway, he showed up about an hour and a half later, had these great big air compressor jacks, weighed about 500 pounds apiece. We had to drag them from the back all the way to the front. So we got these big jacks and lifted the damn engine back up, and needless to say, we didn't finish the trip that day. So we went back to LaSalle, came back the next day, but we made sure we picked up those damn frogs. And how somebody found them and knew what they were, thank God they didn't know how to use them,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because it saved our butt.
Wow. You could have ended up in the Vermilion.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the middle of winter.
There's still track over there by Oglesby along the Vermilion.
Does it
I
go
want
to
to
30?
take you guys over there and show you. It's
Does it go to
cute.
Bailey Falls?
It's in that area. There's,
Well, right at the corner, right before Bailey Falls, is where we hit that frog.
we should take a trip down there.
Yeah, well,
Not today.
Not today.
No.
It's
But it's a little
absolutely.
when it's a little bit warmer and a
Oh,
little less
wow.
dry, a little less wet.
Yeah. What is today? January
Today is the
20,
Yeah, maybe
Third.
maybe June 3rd.
23rd of January today. Very cold outside
Yeah.
of 2024.
Yeah.
And we're doing this great interview with Bob Wamhoff. I met you, Bob, back in '97 when the Railroad Museum in Mendota was just starting. And Pat and Judy Reed. Well, you know Pat Reed. Did you work with Pat Reed? He was.
He was on the way freight a few times. I knew him.
Oh, okay.
He was a good friend of my dad's.
Okay.
And his wife went to school with my sister. Probably both my sisters.
I didn't know that.
Oh, you did too?
Well, they lived in Galesburg.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're
And somebody brought him to my house.
Would it be a tall guy named Ray or something?
Yeah, him and a short, dumpy guy looked like Abbott Lou Costello.
I don't remember him. Who was he? Oh, Alan?
No, Bill Slosher.
Oh, Bill Slusher, yeah.
Slosher's the one that brought you over.
and you've been friends ever since.
Oh,
Yeah,
God.
Oh, that was a good day. That's when I met you. That
Yeah.
had to have been in
I'll tell you this
97.
story. Ray, I don't know how were we at some place or something, but anyway, Bill comes over, Wammy, do me a favor, will you? Take good care of my friend Ray. He's blind as a bat. And I'm like, what? He says, well, he's moving to LaSalle. He says, take good care of him. So I thought, yeah, the guy's blind as a bat. He probably needs a helping hand. And I said, well, shit, after about 10 years of knowing him, he's got better eyeballs than I do, as long as he doesn't have to look over here.
Right.
And I'll tell you another story. This was after the railroad. I worked at the Nickeloid. And I used to go down Brewery Hill and cut across on Water Street to come home after work at 3 o'clock. And I just came down and turned at the corner, and I see this knothead probably 4 blocks away. And I'm like, who in the hell is that? And I go by, and it's him on his bicycle. It's 110 degrees outside, and he's just waving. And I waved back, and I continued to go home. I got a phone call. What was that? About an hour later, you chewed my ass out because I didn't stop and pick you up.
Yeah, I think I was about ready to die of heat exhaustion.
Yeah, and I said, well, I didn't. You weren't telling me. Wasn't doing a stopper.
Yeah.
I'm glad you remember that because I don't. But now that you tell the story, I kind
Well,
of.
anyway, he chewed my ass out because I didn't stop and pick him up. And I said, well, what kind of a dumbass would be down on Water Street when it's 110 in the shade and he's got to pedal that bike all the way up the hill to get home?
I think I called my dad to save me that day.
God, I wouldn't do.
I had to.
But
Yeah,
I thought
I was in that predicament several times.
Bill Slosher was a lying bastard because he can
Oh,
see
come on.
better than I can.
No, I can't. I just used the 10% I have, and I
But
scanned.
you knew who I was the minute I stopped at the stop sign and turned the corner 3 blocks away.
I recognized your bald head.
I had my cap on.
But then I recognized the vehicle.
Yeah.
Okay, you can erase all that crap you want to.
I don't know. I might keep it.
Okay,
in there
back to
for-
railroad. What do you want?
Well, I mean, we covered a lot. I think we would like to see some trains run.
I got a million stories.
Well, my battery's almost.
Okay, what do you want to run?
Well, you've got that steam engine there with the passenger cars there.
Okay, we gotta do a little.
Can you do that one?
Well, let me move some stuff.
All right. Did they reroute trains on the Ziering branch when there was a derailment on the main line?
Yes.
Any particular passenger trains?
The Zephyr went through there in 72 or 3.
Really?
I can remember a couple of big freight trains that went through there.
Really?
But the Zephyr, I about crapped my pants. It was on a Saturday morning, and they had a derailment, a big one at Earlville, and I got a knock on my door at 6:30 in the morning on Saturday. It was my father telling me to get my pants on and get my ass down to the depot, that Gene Shibley needs help. And I said, needs help with what? And he said, just get moving. And so I went, got my pants and my shirt and everything on. I went to the depot, and Gene Shibley was out there trying to put the motor car on the track by himself. And I said, what's up, Gene? He says, thanks for coming, Bob. We got to run to Ziering, check track. And I thought, for what? So we zipped off to Ziering on the motor car. Turned around, came back on the motor car. And I said, what the hell's going on there? He said, they're going to run the Zephyr around the Ziering branch because of the wreck at Earlville. And I was so happy I didn't get a phone call to appear in Earlville to go to work that I was more than happy to ride the motor car all the way to Ziering. But we had to go to Ziering, take off and run to Streeter, which we never went to Streeter on a motor car. Matter of fact, nobody even went to Streeter, period, because it was pretty much dead track back at that time. We went as far as Lowell Junction. So the Streeter branch was pretty much dead territory. So we had to inspect that. We had 2 limbs we had to remove over by the Vermilion River, and then turned the thing around, came all the way back to LaSalle. And just as we got back to LaSalle, they were prepared to stop the Zephyr at LaSalle until we got back. But we got back about 5 minutes before the Zephyr came through, so they gave them a highball all the way to Streator. And it was like, we're standing there looking at this big chrome bastard on the branch. And I got a couple pictures if I can dig them out of the Zephyr. That was one day I brought my camera, but I forgot I had it. So I got a picture of a little kid in the window going like this.
No.
No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, I got a couple people in the dome that were waving, and I got the tail car.
I got to see those pictures.
I'll
put them in the documentary.
Wow.
I'll find them.
How fast were they going?
The speed limit, the highest they could go was 30 miles an hour.
Wow.
That ain't too bad.
And the best part about it was, you had people had a chance at probably Princeton to get off and be bused to Chicago. And half the train refused and stayed on the train.
Wow.
GP35s down across from the depot in LaSalle. I've got a set of F3s that were down
Yeah.
across from the depot in LaSalle. Those were stationed there. Those were helper engines.
Bill Slusher took a couple pictures of those.
Those are probably the ones I have.
Yep.
Head on!
Oops.
Oh my God, Wammy!
It's the wreck of the old 92.
Whoa! I hope nobody died.
Was booked in, it was like 1987. There was a switching job in Streator, BM. They ran over a switch job